Well, in the front of that book, he dedicates it to Lucifer. It's like, okay, that's weird and kind of creepy. And I notice how people would say in the church, I'm not touching that, I wouldn't read that, and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, what's going on here? And so I read it. For the most part, it's just sort of sociological strategies of how to influence people. And I thought, I wonder if they put the Luciferian dedication at the front to keep everybody from reading it so that they wouldn't understand what's actually happening. Because I saw a lot of it, and some of the items weren't inherently evil as far as the technique. It was the way that they were using them and what they were using them for. But it's fascinating, and I decided long ago, I'm not scared of the devil. So subversive literature doesn't scare me. Know thy enemy as thyself. So, certain people come knocking on my door wanting to hand me their materials. I take it. I read it. I want to know what kind of lies they're telling people so I can be prepared. So anyway, they use all these techniques. They're doing all that stuff. What are we doing? You know what I mean? If it works for them, so many people were saying, we talked about being local, engaging local. And, there was this sort of wave of defeatist attitude and depression after last month. And, your vote doesn't count, don't do anything, blah, blah, blah. And we just kept pounding, state, local, state, local, state, local. I kept trying to tell people, I said, hey, guys, there's no such thing as a federal election process. No such thing as federal election process. All election happens at the state and local level. So if election is ever stolen, guess where it's stolen? It doesn't get stolen in D.C. It gets stolen in your local communities, your counties, your state. So state and local, state and local. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, really? So out of one side of your mouth, you just told me that they stole the election, they flipped this, and they influenced, and they did all this. Guess how they did it? At the state and local, by taking over state and local. That doesn't work. Oh, well, it works for them, apparently. Why wouldn't it work for us? I'll tell you a little, and some of you probably don't believe me, and you're already like, yeah, whatever. So I'll tell you a little anecdote real quickly. 2010, the motto of the Tea Party reawakening was take back the house. How many remember that? The slogan was take back the house, take back the house. Well, when we were in the midst of that and working with some activists, and some people got a hold of a memo that went out from the Open Societies Foundation. Who knows what that is? George Soros' foundation that he used to destabilize governments and do all this thing, right? They sent this memo, this directive of here's our plan, here's what we're going to do. And they were basically laughing at the move to take back the house. Stupid conservatives focus on Washington, D.C. And then it said in the memo, here's what we're going to do in the meantime. This was 2010. They said, we're going to pour, and this organization ended up pouring several $1 billion into taking state and local offices, including state attorneys, right? District attorneys, a lot of places call them. There was a certain district attorney, that's a couple of them that have been popular in the news doing things that we thought was outrageous. Guess who got that person elected? And at that time, it was about Agenda 21. They say we're going to move in all the environmental offices. In Florida, we have water management districts, which, all the environmental regulations, all that sort of stuff, we'll take those. City councils, county commissions, because that was what was implementing the ICLEI agenda of Agenda 21 and all of that. And of course, then an ancillary benefit of that was, to get into the supervisor of elections. And that was several. They mentioned supervisor of elections and all this sort of stuff. So how do you think that happened? State and local. They've known that for a long time. So think about this. We are focused on the federal since then, ever since then. In fact, kicked it up a notch. In the last 4 years, we were even more fixated on federal government. And so they've had practically a decade, absolutely unfettered, to build their strongholds at the state and local level. Really longer than that, because they started longer than that, but that organization specifically said, we're going to write a check for several $1 billion and focus on state and local level while they're distracted at the federal government. So don't tell me it doesn't work. That's why we're in the mess we're in. Because what happened was we unplugged from local and state government because of our fixation on, the sexy politics of Washington, D.C. The fact of the matter is, and I hope we've seen this now through the midst of this crisis, There's a level of government that has a lot more immediate effect on you than Washington, D.C. None of this COVID stuff came from D.C. All of your dictates and executive orders and lockdowns and all of that, where did it come from? State and local government. Hello? It's where it's at. And so we have to organize locally. We have to network locally. We have to plug in locally. And then, of course, you have to understand the broad agenda and scheme that's going on that trickles down locally. And so we're going to talk about combating socialism for the next few minutes. I'm going to try to do this faster than I did the one this morning. Amen? That's usually an hour message. I was like, man, it's been 2 hours. What happened? It's your fault. It was your fault. So combating socialism. And again, this is one of those things where people react. We have a tough job because you want to go someplace, especially with conservatives, and teach the Constitution and talk about socialism. Well, every conservative thinks they know everything already about the Constitution, and we know everything about socialism. What is the point of even showing up to some kind of meeting like this, right? That's usually the reaction. What I've discovered in the last year, and I teach. And I mentioned, you read the bio this morning, I was a Russian linguist for the United States Navy. I worked for a national security agency back when we spied on other people, not our own people. I've been studying Soviet history and communist history since 1990. I teach this at the River School of Government, Socialism Under the Microscope in Tampa. It's like basically 2 8-week courses if I were to teach all of this 16-week course. We're going to jam kind of an overview on this in less than an hour. But over the last little while, certain comments and questions would come at me, and I realized, you know what? We've been sold a big lie, and even conservatives have a misconception on what this really is. And we operate on this misconception of what socialism is. And I'm not talking about the brainwashed college kids who think they want socialism. I'm talking about us, those who we know what it is, but we speak about it with really bad terminology. And it ends up giving cover to the bad actors who then just get away with it on and on. So I'm going to front load a couple things. We're going to skip over to time. Well, the timeline. I mean, socialism has a long history, a lot of branches. I mean, I could stand here for 6 months and run through a very, very long, detailed history. But I want to front load a couple things to go ahead and get the shock, go ahead and get you thinking right off the bat. Number one, so just a definition. Kind of, I came up with thinking about all of this. How to understand socialism? What is it? One, it's essentially the socialism. What we're seeing, the promise of free stuff. I notice I said the promise. It's not the actual free stuff, but the promise of free stuff. Because how many know nothing's free? There's no such thing as free stuff. Like even when, we're selling and, can I get this for free? No, you can't get it for free. I might let you have it for no cost to you. Right? Can I get this at no cost to me? Yeah, that's a possibility, but you won't get it for free because that don't happen. Somebody had to pay for it. Right. So the promise of free stuff in order to control people, and here's the key that we so often miss, and consolidate property and wealth into the hands of an elite oligarchy. So it's one of the problems we talk about. What's an oligarchy? Oligarchy, just, a small handful of people running things, right? And the royal few, the elite, the same movement that I'm talking about came up with the term the 1%, right? Maybe we'll have time to get to that. But that's one of the lies, because you hear, you talk about Marxism, because Marxism contained the lies. The theory of Marxism contained the lie, and we repeat it. How many have heard the abolition of private property? Right? That's characteristic of Marxism, abolition of private property. Nope, nonsense. No, it is not. Marxism is anti-capitalist. Socialism anti-capitalist. Nope, it's not. What is capital? Capital is the means of production. Are you telling me in their system it ceases to exist? Did the Soviet Union make stuff? Did they have factories? They have goods that they produce, consumer goods produced from the capital goods? Absolutely. Was it a capitalist system? Yeah, it had capital. Was there private property? Did they eliminate property? No, they did not. It's not about the elimination of property. It's about the consolidation of property. It's not the elimination of money, of wealth, of private property. It is about an elite group of oligarchs making sure the revenue stream is focused and directed into their hands. The property goes into their hands. They'll be private property. It just won't be owned by you. Hello? Oh, like you hear this, the state will own it. What? The state will own it? What does that even mean? Can somebody give me the address of the state? What size underwear does the state wear? Are you get what I'm saying? What is the state? There's no state. No such thing as the state. The state's not a thing. The state's a concept. No, the property the state owns nothing. It will be in the hands of some individuals who have names and addresses. Are you with me? So it's not, they try to hide it from you. Oh, or this is the even better one. It's public property. It's owned by the public. I ask you again, what is the address of the public? Where's Mr. The Public live? Right? And how does the public own stuff? There's no such thing as public. It belongs to society. Society will own it. No. Every piece of tangible property has to be in the hands and under the control of a living, breathing human being. That's the lie of the socialist system. It's not society will own it, the public will own it, the state will own it. No. There are people, and this is, come on, there's most people is old enough, at least as old as me, and we grew up in the Cold War era. We just had a friend of ours who grew up in communist Russia, escaped, lives here. We interviewed her on the show. She said, yeah, there were people, they had nice cars and houses. There was all that. There were all the wealthy, the things you think, oh, rich people have this stuff. Oh, it's there. It was there. She said, here's the characteristic of the communist system, not the absence of those things. It was the fact that ordinary people didn't have them. But if you were a member of the party system, if you were a member of the oligarchy, you had a nice car, you had nice clothes, you had a dacha, a summer home that you went to. Are you following what I'm saying here? We got to stop letting them dictate the narrative to us. No, property ownership is evil. Oh, great. So then you won't own it, big oligarch that's in charge of this system then, huh? No, these rules just apply to you. So it's not about the abolition of property. It's about the consolidation of property. So it's a capitalist system. Every economic system inherently involves capital. You can't not have capital and then have wealth and money produced so that it directs to the hands of the controllers of the system. There has to be capital. Are you listening to me? It's about the control of that capital. So socialism, communism, is command control economy. It's not anti-capitalist. It's really anti-people. It's anti-ordinary people. It's anti-you having property. Are you listening to me? You following what I'm saying? Am I making sense? Yes. And here's the thing. Another, I don't know, illusion, delusion, lie. Socialism, you need to understand, is led by a small number of uber wealthy elite. This is a powerful statement. In Pastor Rodney's book, Socialism Under the Microscope, he says, socialism is not, because we think, it's an uprising of the peasantry, socialism and all the people that don't have anything, all of a sudden they're demanding free stuff. Socialism is not a movement of the poor against the rich. It is a movement of the rich against the poor. That's what socialism really is. It's flipped so that the people swallow it. This is the proletariat, workers of the world unite. Gobbledygook. It's never been that way. That's always been pretense. People kept coming to me in this last year, JC, why are all these billionaires? This guy's a billionaire. Why would Zuckerberg support socialism? And I immediately know I'm talking to a person who really doesn't understand how socialism works and how it's always worked. Rich people have always, the uber wealthy elite, it's always been uber wealthy elite. And this is not an anti-wealth, anti-rich person. What I'm trying to do is put to bed the lie. This is some pro-poor, this is pro-poor people. It's not. It is not. It's about a group of uber wealthy oligarchs wanting to milk. First off, make everybody equally poor and then milk them like cattle so that the revenue stream goes directly to their hands. The new Great Reset, World Economic Forum, I'm watching some of their videos, and there's a stupid video about nobody will own anything and they'll be happy. And it says you don't have to own anything. It says something in there, it's playing the video, and then there's little words, and it said something like no more property. And then it goes on to say, you can rent everything you need. Okay, how stupid can we be to swallow that? No property, but you can rent everything you need. Okay, if there's no property, there's no ability to rent something. If you're renting something, there's property. Somebody has to own something for you to rent from them. Hello? How freaking dumb do they think we are? Oh, there's no property. You could just rent everything. Okay, somebody has property. Somebody's owning property. It's not about the abolition of property. It's now they control all the property, and if you want to enjoy it, you go to them, and therefore they get all the profits from it, and they use that profit, they use the wealth, they use the revenue to broaden their system of control over the people. It's a self-feeding system. You are feeding your own prison to be built around you. By them manipulating the system where they take everything you have, you don't have control of it, they have control of it, and you have to go to them for the use of it. This is what we see with Google and Amazon and how they're trying to consolidate. And it's all this lie, we care for humanity, and it's all pro this group and pro that group. It's utter nonsense. You're seeing the consolidation essentially of every freaking thing, and you got to go to them. And if they don't like what you think, boom, no access. In fact, you no longer exist. We're going to wipe you from reality. When the AI age was born in 2016, and we all entered into that and got drawn into, now we're all digital people basically, and you can just be erased because we've moved all of our life into the digital sphere, and just with a click of the button, now you're gone. And the trick is they have control of it. It's in their hands, and you have to think only what they say you can think, or that's it. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? So the idea of socialism and this promise of free stuff, the sort of narrative and propaganda that they use, is this delusional, almost juvenile, cartoonish concept of utopia, which, by the way, is an anti-God concept, strangely enough. It's man creating paradise on his own, right? It's heaven on earth without God, right? We don't need your heaven, we don't need your earth, we don't need your kingdom, we can do it ourselves. Utopia, which says that everybody's going to live together in harmony and peace and love, and then you're going to share everything. Except, sorry, that's not the way people are built. That's not the way the world works. You have some exceptions. You have people that are just, completely detached from anything material and sharing and, all that sort of thing. There are those kind of people that exist. That's not the norm for the bulk of society. And this is the problem with the utopian systems and why they must always devolve into force, which will lead to tyranny. Why? Because capitalism is very simply a manifestation of human nature. It's you simply wanting to improve your personal situation. Right? That's right. It's your desire for that which is better. Are you with me? It's really just that simple. That's the capitalist drive. It goes under many names, right? People, say greed and want and desire and whatever. It's you have a desire to see your situation improve, and there's something you can do about it. And everybody has that desire. And you set about fulfilling your desire, and you develop your skills, you develop, your resources, whatever. You end up producing a product, and then you find out somebody likes that product, somebody needs that product, they have something you like or want, you have something they like or want that can improve your situations. Like if I get that, I'll be better off. And he says, well, if I can get that, I'll be better off. Okay, you want to make a deal? And you enter into this mutual trade relationship, right? And we created currency, that's more portable and we can make this happen more efficiently, blah, blah, blah. That's capitalism. It's just human nature. Amen? So you actually can't get rid of capitalism. Are you with me? You can't stamp out the free market. The only way to do that is get rid of human beings, which I know that's part of what they want to do. If you brainwash a significant amount and then get rid of the ones that are still operating on their natural tendencies, and then we're okay. Problem is you're going to keep having babies, and you just can't keep that down forever. I don't care what kind of brainwashing system you have. There's always going to be somebody pop up, say, you know what? I don't like the level that you've decided for everybody else. I'd like to be a little better in my situation than what you've said is as far as I can go. And then you're going to have this guy who's a rebel, and then you're going to have to stamp that guy out with force. Other people are going to be watching. Then there's a crack in the wall because they think, wait a minute, people probably shouldn't be treated like that. Yeah, he was an oddball, but look how they murdered him, and I don't think that's good. Then it spreads, and here you are again. Force, crush the people. That's what it always leads to. That's why we've seen the brutality of communist systems all over the world. So what about the rise of the Marxist style communism? And it's a big family, right? Socialism has a big family, lots of different flavors of socialism that have come about. The bulk of our industrial history has been dominated by Marxist, Leninist technically style socialism. We'll get to that. So what is that? Really, it was kind of a response to the Industrial Revolution where this took hold. Marx is an anarchist. Marx influenced by Proudhon and other anarchist writers. And he begins, concocting his schemes in the Communist Manifesto and in Das Kapital and all this sort of stuff. And here is Edward Bernstein, who is the heir apparent to Karl Marx until Bernstein decides, this Marxism stuff just doesn't work. It seems it's not working. It's not happening, what Marx said. And then they find out, wait a minute, our hero, our superstar of Marxism is about to walk off the plantation. We got to put a stop to this. And Lenin steps in and says, I'm now the head of this movement, and forget that guy. But as he was still plugged into Marxism and he's writing, by the way, I encourage you to, read their journals. Some of the biggest gobbledygook nonsense you're ever going to read. It's incredible. It's shocking how almost juvenile the writing is. These are supposed to be the intellectual superstars of the movement, writing all this stuff. It's dumb. It's unbelievably dumb. You think like a 10-year-old wrote it. Seriously. It makes no sense. You start to read it. Which is why, by the way, that the students in the colleges, they don't read these guys. They don't actually read Marx. They don't actually read Bernstein. They read some professor's book about what they want them to believe Marxism is about. I really have a sneaky suspicion if you actually read the intellectual segment of the founders of Marxism, most of the kids would go, this is retarded. This doesn't work in reality. Who would believe this stuff, right? But it's interpreted through the mind control leaders in our universities. But look at this stuff. In reaction to the Industrial Revolution, this big transformation, I don't think we can even imagine the Industrial Revolution at this point. We've lived with machines, since then. It's just not even a concept we can wrap our brain around. But you can imagine an entire culture, that their culture was agrarian, we're in the pasture, we're raising sheep and cattle and all this stuff, and all of a sudden there's this magic of machines. It must have seemed otherworldly. They were just, it was indescribable. I didn't even have the words for it. But you can read some of the people describing this and just how their reaction to what was going on. And you get the birth of a lot of these philosophies when, the world peace and all this sort of the scientism and various things came as an outgrowth of the Industrial Revolution, because they thought it was so magical and so, monumental and so miraculous that, wow, we can solve all the world's problems now. It's going to be paradise on earth. And it was this globalist utopia sprung up. But then another side of the reaction was, here's these brand new machines. We haven't fully developed the notion of doing this stuff safely. People are getting arms ripped off and killed and sucked into machines. Just a lot of bad, this is crazy, this is rough. And obviously if you're working in the factory with the machines and that happens to you, that's not good. You don't like that. And it's pollution and it's nasty and all this stuff. So you have this transition, a lot of workers displaced, people losing their jobs. And so the socialism really comes in as a reaction to this. And it's always funny as you walk in the footsteps of these people who call themselves progressives throughout history, they're always the opposite of progressive. Their philosophies are really always a reactionary philosophy to some sort of progress that's been made, some technological development or some sort of progress, and then they pull back against the progress. We're the progressives. Like, really? Okay. So this is, again, one of those instances. And look at this. It's almost silly. It's almost laughable how he describes this. And this was Bernstein writing this, and one of the reasons Bernstein later said, okay, never mind. Because this is because he's faced with reality. What he lives, he starts to live through the Industrial Revolution and the results of it. And he realizes, no, it didn't work that way. So he says, this technology altered the whole mode of production and displaced the former workers. I mean, listen to the complaint. Right? Listen to the complaint. This terrible, awful, evil thing. You know what the evil reality that came about was this. The machines turned out cheaper and better commodities than the workers could produce in their inefficient spinning wheels and hand looms. Right? Oh, the travesty. All of a sudden, we can make stuff that doesn't cost as much and is actually better, and we can do it more efficiently. And the horror of the workers no longer get to produce this stuff that costs people more, that's inefficient, that's lower quality. That's horrible. Really? That's the complaint. So this is typical, this is what progressives sound like. The price of labor, and here's their prediction, the price of labor or the wage will, in other words, be the minimum required for the maintenance of life. So, you're in the free market system, and what's going to happen is, the people with the capital, the bourgeoisie, they're going to have this, and all they're going to do is basically give you, a sack of scraps, a couple chicken bones, and a tunic. You're just going to have just enough to survive. Most of you guys look like you're doing pretty well. Amen. And probably have had jobs. How many's had a job? You go, you're entry level, and you develop your skills, you gain experience over time, and you climb, and you get better pay, and on it goes. You get promoted, blah, 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 right? That's the way it works. And then Bernstein over the years saw, yeah, it is the way it works. It actually was not a slave, every capitalist venture is not a slave labor camp, as they were preaching to everybody. And he later decides, what Marx said about what's going to happen, it's actually not. He says more people have been lifted out of poverty by free market capitalism, and efficiency has increased. The goods are better. The goods are cheaper. We develop different jobs, so displaced workers are now doing other things. They now are gaining jobs again. Not to say there weren't problems, but this is the key. This is what the socialists do. This is what the manipulators do. They seize on calamity and suffering, and they see it as an opportunity. That's what the Global Reset is saying. The World Economic Forum is saying, now what an opportunity we have with this pandemic. All these people dead, that is a great opportunity. It's the same thing Carnegie and Rockefeller said about the war. Carnegie, famously writes in the editorial, we need to make sure this war lasts as long as it possibly can, so that the people are really shocked and sickened by all the death, and that'll give us a great opportunity to institute what they called their internationalist agenda, which was the League of Nations, then the United Nations, and the global agenda of one world government. And the story, the division was the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. So the bourgeoisie, this is the rich capitalists, this is the rich guys that own all the stuff, that hold all the stuff. And then there's just the proletariat, the factory workers, the poor workers. Workers of the world unite. We're for the workers, and we're here to defend the workers. And the bourgeoisie are the evil people, the bourgeois class. Let me drop some secret knowledge on you. Guess what class Karl Marx was in? Can you read that? Father, wealthy attorney, vineyard owner. Mother, Dutch heiress of the Philips Electronics Company. The third line of the Communist Manifesto is abolish all inheritance. Guess what happened after Karl Marx's rich mother passed away? Thank you. He received a sizable inheritance. It was several years after he wrote the Communist Manifesto. I want to suggest to you he didn't go back and edit that and update it. He just took the inheritance. He was supported by his wealthy industrialist brother. He was a total mooch. His dad was complaining. His dad complains in the writings and the letters and saying that, Marx, the only time you want to come around and see us and talk to us is when you need money. His mom's dying. She died. The only reason he showed up is to get the inheritance. So he pretty much a mooch all of his life. He had to be supported by his brother and supported by Engels. Wait a minute. You mean Marx and Engels, the other co-writer, Das Kapital, Communist Manifesto? Yep, you guessed it. Another bourgeoisie, son of a wealthy industrialist. His dad owned textile mills. You know how many days Karl Marx spent as a proletariat, factory floor worker? You know how many days Karl Marx ever stepped foot on a factory floor? You know how many days Engels stepped foot on a factory floor that his dad didn't own? Bourgeoisie. Lenin, wealthy mother, a middle-class father that moved up into the upper class of society. So another guy, he's not proletariat, not a poor guy. Karl Marx pretty much never worked a day in his life. They say his job was a journalist. No, he wrote radical literature to radicalize people. That's not a journalist. That's a propagandist. He never actually worked a day in his life. Lenin's sister died and really messed up this dude's head. His brother ends up being hanged because he's an anarchist and tried to overthrow the czarist government, and something snapped in Lenin, and he pretty much, solidified his place as a murderous psychopath. So go back real quick. I mentioned to you, I said, you heard me say, I saw some eyebrows go up even when I said it, that Marx was an anarchist. How many knew Marx was an anarchist? Good, not very many people. Hey, JC, that doesn't make any sense. Doesn't anarchy mean no state? Correct. Anarchist is a utopianistic philosophy, which says that the state is the largest oppressor on the planet, which could very well be true. And they say that so the only way to liberate humanity is to have no state, no government. By the way, I don't care if you have two people, you'll have government. Right? Government is basically you get together and decide how things are going to go. That's really it. And then maybe you divide up responsibilities. That's government. So you're going to have government no matter what. Some of the argument is, usually voluntarist, temporary government. You have some of the anarchist philosophy. And I must say, anarchism, the philosophy of anarchism is not inherently evil. There's nothing inherently evil about anarchy as a political philosophy. Okay? We'll get to that in a second. But Marx was an anarchist. So that sounds strange. It is strange because Marx had this very bizarre notion of what his philosophy meant. So we have to liberate humanity by having the utopia of no state. Marx's idea was, okay, if we're in our little communes, growing our veggies, growing our carrots, and smoking our peace pipe and wearing our hemp dress or whatever. He said, we're not going to have power to, overthrow and crush the current social order. The only thing powerful enough to do that would be a complete totalitarian state. So in order to have no state, we need to create a totalitarian state to crush the current social order. That was his twisted anarchist idea. So Marx literally saw what we came to know as the Soviet Union. He saw it as a transitional form of government. Problem was Marx was dead by the time the Russian Revolution happened, and a certain psychopath that we were already introduced to stepped on the scene, and his goal was not to have a totalitarian state as a transitional form of government. It was the end-all, be-all, because Lenin realized nobody's going to voluntarily submit to the doctrine that we're trying to peddle. We're going to have to make them. And what's nice and convenient about having this totalitarian government is I can kill everybody I don't like, which is what he did, what he set out to do. Lenin was equally as much evil as Stalin. Again, as I said, influenced by Proudhon. One of the others so the parallel there, and this is important. Mikhail Bakunin was a leader of the anarchist movement under the socialists, and then you had Marx. Marx, right, the Marxists, the red flags, rolled into Tsarist Russia with Bakunin's crew, the black flags. Well, as soon as they had displaced the Tsar and Lenin had set up, his throne as a dictator in what would be the Soviet Union, off with the heads of the black flags. So the anarchists, the revolutionary anarchists, have always been tools, useful idiots, and they think they're going to have a seat at the table. They're out there burning down businesses and rioting in the street. They think at the end of the day they're going to have a seat at the table. I got bad news for you. History doesn't bear that out. As soon as the collectivists, Leninists have full control, you're going to be hanging on the gallows right beside the rest of us. That's what happened. So, and then Bakunin, they basically go to Europe. You have European anarchism develop. You had these utopianists coming to America. One of the guys goes with another fella, sets up a commune in Indiana. He goes there, it collapses. He's a witness to that, and he goes, okay, this collectivist anarchy is crazy. It's not going to work. And so he became the father of individualist anarchism. So basically you have a European-style anarchism and American-style anarchism, where that American-style anarchism leans more to individualist anarchy, which, taken to its end, you end up with the sovereign citizen movement and all that sort of stuff. And then the others are the collective anarchists, such as Antifa, etc. And this is important. This is an important thing to understand. I want to stick with we'll come back to the anarchist explanation in a minute. So I want to talk to you about the infiltration. This is informative when you think about the infiltration of the socialists. The Soviet Union during that time period basically is trying to come into the East Coast, the port cities, the Boston and New York and all that place. And so it's no coincidence why we have the certain coloration of our map these days. And isn't it funny how it's flipped, right? What the red represents now, which is not red of the red that was infiltrating with its communism. Anyway, I'll leave that alone. But that's part of the enemy controls the language, flips the narrative. I mean, remember liberal, right? What liberal means today, completely the 180-degree opposite of what liberal meant originally, right? And now you have to clarify, and you'll hear people saying, well, I'm a classical liberal, which means you believe in liberty, because they realize when you use the word liberal today, it's the opposite. So it's one of their techniques: control the language, control the narrative, control the imagery. So red, now you embrace red. So, but on this side, right, so that was the Soviet Union trying to move in. Well, America's a one-track mind kind of culture, and we're fixated from the 50s forward for about 80 years on the evil Russian bear. Meantime, nobody's watching the West Coast, and that's where the Maoist communists infiltrate. And they have a natural foothold because of the historical Chinese settlement of the West Coast. And so there's a few connections that they have that they're able to leverage and manipulate those people and use them to bring in their subversive measures. So, and there's a reason why I mention this. Of course, now we see, they want to move inward, and we get a sense of why Middle America has been so contiguously red, has been so conservative. And I still think a majority of people in America are conservative. They just don't vote their values. They just don't, operate according to their values. When you actually get out and talk to people and you start talking to people about the actual content of values, you discover how conservative a majority of people are. I think about the Latino community in Florida. I mean, by and large are just God-fearing, people of faith and hard work and whatever. And you go, guys, you're voting as a block for these folks that hold the opposite values? I mean, where I grew up in the South, and on my father's side, my great-great-grandfather was an African slave. So my father's side of the family doesn't look like me. And all the people that, all the people on my dad's side and all the black Americans, when we grew up, they're people of faith, hard work, family values, that sort of thing where I'm at. But yet the 94% of them are voting for people that don't represent their values. So the majority of people, I still believe this, don't support Marxism. They're not for it. They just don't recognize what's happening, and they don't connect their actions with their values. They're manipulated by, one little thing or some propaganda or some people are controlled. Amen? That's why connection is very important. One of the ways they control us is disconnect. I think I said this earlier already. They disconnect us, and then they make caricatures of other people. And if you don't know them, this is how white people are. This is how black people are. This is how Asian people are. These leftists are like this. Liberals are like this. Conservatives. It's just all caricatures to divide. And so, of course, if the technique is divide, then the answer is connection. I think of the guy. I said this the other night. I think of the guy in Dallas. Remember the guy in Dallas? He's shooting the police officers, the big police shooting. The guy in Dallas, he's assassinating police, whatever. One of the first thoughts I had is, I bet that guy doesn't actually have any law enforcement in his family, or he doesn't know anybody personally. Because if he did, he'd see a face of somebody as he's killing people. You understand what I'm saying? And so they divide us. You don't actually know anybody in that group. You just have had a caricature built in your mind, and so you can hate somebody that you don't know. It's when you see a face, when you make connection, when you make a relationship. I never forget, Rush Limbaugh told a story about a lady, an author, that went to travel around, I think it was the South. She went to the South, and she wanted to live with conservatives and hang out with conservatives. She was a progressive, and she was trying to write a book about how evil conservatives were. But the problem was, she went around and met them. She had to totally change her book. She said, you know what? They're not a lot different than we are. They hold a lot of the same values I do. We've just latched on to different solutions. And from our perspective, they don't recognize the damage and danger of the solutions they're being offered, because it's a whole scheme. This is what we're talking about. It's a scheme of control. Real quick, the Soviet infiltration, all this, just quickly, this guy, just kind of, for your interest, research interest, Alexander Trachtenberg, probably the most influential communist in American history, and nobody knows who he is. Created international publishers. You can still go to their website today and buy all your Marxist communist publications and become a good socialist. So remember I said, and this is where people scratch their head, it's a capitalist system led by a small number of uber wealthy elite. You need to understand the hierarchy of the socialist scheme. As I said, it's always been led by the uber wealthy, the global corporatist when we look around today, this is it. Those globalist billionaires, that's who's driving socialism. Are you still with me? That's why you need to push that contradiction out of your mind. When I say global billionaires driving socialism, and there's that thing that goes, that doesn't fit. No, it fits. Remember, socialism is about consolidating wealth, power, and making the revenue stream go into their hands. That is socialism. That's why they're in charge. That's why when the so-called pandemic hit, mom and pop has to close their doors, but all the global corporations, they can do whatever they want. Are you with me? Think about all the big globalist corporations, these multi-billionaire socialists. Oh, no, you don't have to close. You don't have to have a limit on how many people go in and out of your store all day. But the church is non-essential. You can only have none or 10 or 25%. What about Amazon? Oh, no, they're fine. Walmart? No, they're fine. This billionaire corporation? Oh, no, they're fine. They're fine. They're not a threat. They're immune. So global corporatists, I call them the funders. Then there's the state Leninists, I call the front men. And the revolutionary anarchists or anarcho-communists, I call the fanatics. So global corporatists, like this guy, Jonathan Gray, Blackstone Group, some of the biggest funders and donors to the socialist scheme in the world, billionaires. Blackstone Group, it is shocking. Blackstone Group has the software that essentially operates the accounting system of the Federal Reserve. Hashtag just saying. Coincidence, right? Shockingly, a certain recently elected individual has members of the Blackstone Group from top to bottom in his administration. Just saying. And I had to laugh because you know somebody who apparently doesn't realize that rich billionaires have always run socialism? AOC. I laughed my butt off. I mean, I already thought she was the dumbest person ever elected to Congress, and then I realized she is dumber than I thought she was. Because she was apoplectic that she started complaining, Biden is putting all these global corporatists in his administration. And I was like, she actually thinks the proletariat runs socialism. Oh my God, she actually believes this stuff. She thinks her crowd is the one running this, and you know, they deserve the factory. When did the factory worker ever run anything in Soviet Union? They're putting all these he's putting all these global oligarchs in power. Hello, welcome to the party, moron. It's the way it's always worked. It's not a surprise if you know what you're looking at. You know this lady, big donor to global socialism. This guy, I want to send him a Valentine. Mark Benioff, Salesforce. You talk about hypocrisy. I wanted to vomit. I don't know. You guys know we have a podcast, right? Some of you know we have. Some of you just found out we have a podcast. So we reran one that I did just the other day. It was just me doing a presentation on the global reset. I think I talked about this Jack Leg. Salesforce. Salesforce is a CRM, customer relations management software. You go to his website, and you see the little testimonials. And he's like, here is so-and-so, I don't remember the company, but here's whatever CEO of this company, and it says, using CRM, he increased his profit margins year over year by 300%, blah, blah, blah. And I see Benioff sitting at the World Economic Forum chastising us about the evils of us having been fixated on the maximization of profits. I mean, I got white-knuckled listening to that. I was like, what? How freaking dumb are we to swallow that kind of hypocrisy? This guy's running stuff. He's a multi-billionaire telling you how evil you are for being focused on maximizing profits, the very software that made him his billions. You go to his Salesforce website right now, and the testimonies are bragging on how it makes entrepreneurs and owners of businesses maximize their profits. That's how little respect and little regard they have for you. That's how stupid they think you are. He's going to be right in your face saying this garbage. That is absolutely 180 degrees contradiction of everything this guy's about. But it's supposed to apply to you, not to him. Hello? Can I remind you again? It's not about the elimination of wealth. It's about the consolidation of wealth. And he said, well, why would he maximize the profits of business owners? Well, because it's his software. And he's collected. The more profitable they are, then he's collecting, and he's funneling all that to himself. And the clock's ticking on these guys that he's helping, because he's expanding his system of control over them. I mean, they're fine as long as they don't mind signing up to his agenda, moving to the 2030 stack them and pack them, no cars, everybody's on a bike, walking gardens on your roof cities that we need to move into. And if you don't agree with that, we're going to, whack you. Otherwise, no, it's not for you. All the profits are for him. I mean, the hypocrisy. Everybody knows this guy. I don't need to dwell on that. Oh, you probably know that guy. This guy just bought up something like 250 million acres of prime farmland in America. He's trying to control your food. Remember, we're talking about the rise of the Antichrist system. This is what we're dealing with. So those are the globalists, the global corporatists, the funders, the state Leninists. You know these guys. Remember, Lenin was all about the acquisition of power, and the state is the end. It's the end goal. As long as we're in power, we can control people. We can dictate, what people are doing, and we can murder them if we need to. The guy on the left's a murderer, FYI, just in case you hadn't been following the news. And state Leninist. Those are those guys. So I mean, really, if you think about it, technically, there are no Marxists. There are practically no Marxists. They're Leninists. Because remember, Marx was an anarchist who thought this system would be transitional. We'd move into the utopian no state. There are no Marxists, really. They're Leninist. This is what they are. They forgot about that whole transitional utopian thing. This is utopia for them. They have a system where they can control all of humanity. Now, this is important. So run your radar up. If I've caused you to yawn, listen to me right here. Are you with me? Everybody look at me right now. Everybody looking at me? Okay, this is an important part. This is where we are right now. I want to talk about this. It's important that you hear this. The revolutionary anarchist movement. Okay, remember I said the utopianists, the utopian anarchists. These are the useful idiots. These are the street level useful idiots sold the socialist Marxist propaganda, the utopian propaganda, and they're manipulated into making chaos. The whole point is for them to cause disruption. The globalists work through the state Leninists to send the marching orders to the useful idiots, revolutionary anarchists on the ground. They go out and cause trouble and wreak havoc. So then the state Leninists back above them can go, see, there's a problem. Oh, coincidentally, we have the solution. Now the solution involves taking more of your liberty, squeezing the thumb screws down a little more. And the revolutionary anarchists have been used by tools like this, useful idiots. Some of them are sincere. They bought it, and they believe it, and they think their cause is righteous. Some of them literally think their cause is righteous, just because they've been propagandized. Not because they're necessarily evil. They're ignorant and brainwashed. Are you with me? I'm serious about that. Not everybody out there burning stuff down and all this. I mean, we look at the deeds like the deeds that looks pretty evil. But I'm talking about the intent of their heart. It's not like we want to hurt people. Not all of them are we want to hurt people. No, they're so deluded, so brainwashed. Amen? They don't need our condemnation. They need the deliverance through the blood of Christ. Really. I mean, condemnation too to snap them out of it. But I want you to understand this. The revolutionary anarchist movement, see, we fell into the trap. They're always dictating a narrative to us, and especially here in this area, especially in the Northwest. And we spent the whole summer saying, Antifa, 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 BLM, BLM, which puts the revolutionary anarchist movement squarely on the left. I got news for you guys. The revolutionary anarchist movement is neither right nor left. It's right and left. Because remember I said there's a European tree, an American tree. On the one side, it's individualist anarchism. On the other side, it's collectivist anarchism. So the collectivist anarchists say, get rid of the state, leave us alone so we can live in peace and share our stuff. The individualist anarchist says, get rid of the state, leave us alone so I can control my own stuff and I don't have to share with anybody. But the one thing they agree on is that the only way to bring about change is political violence. Are you with me? This is the commonality in the sides in the philosophy. That political violence is the only way to do it. The state is the biggest evil. It's not going to reform. It can't be reformed. And so it takes force. It takes violence. That's the only way to do it. And we're not talking about righteous violence, if you will. Right? Because we have a self-defense, right? The violence of self-defense, the alter abolish in the Declaration of Independence. We agree with that. Amen? I believe in every single word of the Declaration of Independence. I'm with that. When we're there, that's fine. Okay? What I'm trying to tell you, what I'm trying to inform you about is you need to know there is a group which is a tool for this agenda. And they have placed them on both sides of the political spectrum to draw in unsuspecting, disaffected, angry people into their trap. I spent a year And this has a long history. It's a 100-year history just in the United States. I wrote an article about this. You go on chrisanhall.com, look up the article Anarchist Violence. It's a good primer of the history of the revolutionary anarchists in America. Over 100 years they've been doing this. It's strangely enough, back in 1919, almost exactly 100 years from when this stuff kicked off, you had the bombings all over America by revolutionary anarchists targeting government officials, government offices, and all these things, Rockefeller offices. Like, we're not real sympathetic with that, but nevertheless, they're bombing everywhere. Getting rid of evil government. Who's oppressing us so much? Okay, that sounds all well and good. And we kind of agree with the sentiment, which is the hook. That's the trap. You go to revolutionary abolitionist, right? The revolutionary abolitionist movement, which was before BLM kind of solidified their mark, in revolutionary anarchist abolitionist movement, and they wrote a book called Burn Down the American Plantation. So you can Google that, Burn Down the American Plantation. You go find that. You can download it, PDF, free. And the interesting thing, when you read through there, you see all the problems. They list all sorts of problems. It's fascinating that many of the problems are legitimate. And I'm reading through BLM, revolutionary abolition. I'm going, yeah, that is a problem. Yeah, qualified immunity. I don't like that either. Yeah, this is a problem, this is a problem. Because this is what they do. This is part of the trap. This is part of the trick where they draw people in. So you think you have common ground. They don't like government. I don't like government. I think government's evil. We need to get rid of government. Yeah, that sounds good. For a year, I'm listening to now my libertarian friends, as I sort of, years ago, kind of aligned myself philosophically with the little L libertarian philosophy of liberty. And I start hearing friends, and they're like, "Oh, libertarians are anarchists." What? When did that happen? Oh, libertarians always been anarchists. It's anarchist. And I said, what is going on here? What is with this? Well, Murray Rothbard was an anarchist. Yeah, but this is not the same thing that you're saying here. What's happening? That's when I started digging into this and started researching the history and found out. And and I finally, once I saw the history and saw the technique and saw the scheme, and I said, guys, this is a trap. Patriots, you're angry. You're rightfully angry. I get it. I'm angry too. What they're feeding you is not what's going on here. They're laying a trap. Do not yoke up with these people. And you heard some people at the Capitol yelling at other folks going, "We're not Antifa. What are you doing? That's not who we are." And it was a small minority that engaged in this. Is what people say, well, it's a small minority, JC. We had tens of thousands standing. They were peacefully protesting. They didn't do anything. Yeah, I get that. But here's the thing. That's always been the way. When these bombings and all this was happening in 1919, and you ended up with the Palmer raids and the government squeezing regular people, throwing out the big dragnet, it was just a small handful of people. You know what they call their bombings? Because this is, it's not about there's a majority of people that want to overthrow the government. This is a big movement, No, it's not that. Do you know what they called their political violence? Here's the key. It's called, and you can Google this, you can search it, research it. It's called propaganda of the deed. Propaganda of the deed. You're not accomplishing anything by putting a pipe bomb at the Attorney General's house and, boom, all it blew up, whatever. You're liberating people. No, it's not going to happen. You busted into some federal property and you did what? We liberated people from the oppressive government. No, actually you didn't. It's always happened that way because it's about the optics. They set it up. They have to have two sides, the left anarchist, the right anarchist. And here's what they do. It's like infiltrators. You only have a couple guys. They organize it, and then you just start drawing in liberals who are upset. They feel like they're being oppressed, and all of a sudden now you have this handful of guys now build a big movement of unsuspecting, useful idiots on the left that are out there ready to blow up stuff and beat up people and whatever. And then you get the same on the right, and they're drawing a group and listening. We need to not put up in that. Nobody's doing anything. We're going to meet them. We'll meet them in the grass, and we'll fight them. And you get sucked into their optics. You're being played like marionettes. And I'm not saying some of these people, it's not like, okay, you're saying this group that faced down Antifa was anarchist. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is they got drawn into the anarchist optics, the globalist optics, so that now the state Leninists can stand back and go, you see there? That's a problem. I got these couple of laws that we can pass and these couple of restrictions we can pass, blah, 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 blah. That's how it's always happened. It's not about that, oh, it's a big group of people that were into this. No, it's a small group of people. And they suck other people in, and then they use the event to leverage against the people to take your liberty. I'm not going to belabor this much longer, but folks, I beg you, please get educated about this scheme. I warn people, I beg people, don't do it. We're going to go do this. Control yourself. There's a trap being laid. You're going to get sucked in, and then it's just going to hurt you, and it's going to hurt the broader movement. It's going to hurt your fellow Americans. You're not going to accomplish what they're saying you're going to accomplish. This is a trap. It is a fraud. It is a scheme. It's scripted. It's been done over and over and over again. Our problem is we don't know our history, and we keep falling for it. They're not your friends, guys. This is not our movement. War, class war. You were the first to wage it under the cover of the powerful institutions you call order and darkness of your laws. There will have to be bloodshed. We will not dodge. There will have to be murder. We will kill because it is necessary. There will have to be destruction. We will destroy to rid the world of your tyrannical institutions. And they use language that they think will connect to angry patriots, and you'll get sucked into it. And it's a trap. Leave it alone. We're not there yet. Hello? And by the way, I heard this nonsense. This is our 1776 revolution. Guys, if that's what your revolution looks like, we're in trouble. Study some history. Pick up some military history. That might be informative. That's not how you carry out a revolution. And that's how you know it was a trap. Hello? That poor girl gets shot, hits the deck. They all freeze like a bunch of church mice. Oh, yeah, you're revolutionaries. You've been had, guys. Some of our patriot friends, you've been had. It's the revolutionary anarchist movement. Get informed. Don't let that happen again. Don't do it. If we know our history, we won't walk into these traps. So, back to the socialists. Some of the difference, I showed you the map, the East Coast, West Coast, the difference. There's two different revolutions. So when you talk about the Marxist revolution in the Soviet Union, they were industrialized society. You already had the industrial economy, so it could be a class revolution. In China, they didn't have that. So it had to be a cultural revolution. So when you see these techniques, the Soviets didn't use the race narrative. They didn't use the cultural element. That's a Maoist technique. So this is an indication. This is a fingerprint of who you're dealing with. This is a fingerprint of what the source is of what you're doing, what you're dealing with. It's no surprise that all the movers and shakers and founders of these movements come from the West Coast. That's where the Maoist influence and infiltration took place, and this is where they come out of. This is James Cone wrote The Black Church and Marxism. What do they have to say to each other? Right? Because it's always infiltrate the church. That's always the first. The church is the place that influences people. The church is a community. They want that leverage. They want that power. They want that voice. And so they got to get in the church first and corrupt the church. And they leverage suffering. So you have to hearken back to all the evils of slavery and the suffering that people suffered in slavery, and you've been abused, and just you have to bang that drum, and you have to magnify that. You have to make that metastasize in the psyche of black Americans in particular, so that this is able to take hold, so they feel there's a commonality, there's kinship, they're for me. You've suffered so much. They capitalize off of suffering. Amen? Are you with me? It's not that slavery wasn't evil. It was evil. There are evils of slavery. It's not to whitewash slavery. It's the point they use it as a tool. They don't care about black lives. That's a pretense. They don't care about accountability for bad police. That's a pretense. They could care less. It's about a subversive agenda that they want to put forward. Columbia University, this is one of their events. How the Irish became white. The invention of the white race, the origins of racial oppression in Anglo-American. Theodore Allen. So they're going to sit and talk about this book, and this is what they're teaching. This is the propaganda of division. How many remember the debate where Chris Wallace was debating the president in the presidential debates? And Chris Wallace chastised President Trump for the executive order that he had issued. And in Chris Wallace's terms, getting rid of racial sensitivity training in the federal government and in our universities. Okay, it either demonstrates Chris Wallace is a liar, or he's so woefully inept at his job that he does no research about the questions that he's asking. Or both. Because racial sensitivity, like if I say racial sensitivity training, probably the majority of the people in this room are going to go, okay, that's fine. There's not a lot wrong with that, whatever. Which is why they use that term. It wasn't racial sensitivity training. It was this white lady's book, White Fragility, the concept of white fragility, why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. And then basically the core principle is, if you don't have brown skin, you're inherently racist at your core. There's absolutely nothing you can do to change that, and you just simply need to spend the rest of your life doing what you can to atone for your racism. And that's if you've never even committed an act of race, like you've never done anything overtly. There's no behavior. It's just in you. It's like part of your DNA because of your skin color. Hello? I mean, you heard skin color is only skin deep, right? We're talking about differences of people because of the amount of pigment in cells. Like there's no inherent difference in the people. There's only one race, the human race. Right? A flower is a flower. God made flowers, but they're all different colors. They're still flowers. God made the birds. They're all different colors, different feathers, different shapes and sizes. They're still all birds. Hello? There's only one race, the human race. But they want to divide, and this nonsense, this is what's being taught in the colleges and in the federal workforce. And Biden came in on day 2. Or Trump's executive order said the government will not spend any money on any training or teaching or support any philosophy that scapegoats a group of people based on the color of their skin. And Biden said, oh, no. We are absolutely going to teach people to scapegoat groups of people based on the color of their skin. Right? Trump basically says no racist teaching in here. And Biden says, oh, yeah, we're going to have racist teaching in here. We're going to teach racism. Right? Racist teaching. Not teaching about racism, but promoting racism. Disgusting. It's evil. And so some of these groups, some of this Maoist infiltration with the racial narrative. Remember, this is a Maoist fingerprint. Chinese Communist parties, in some cases literally funded by the Chinese Communist Party. Here's Chinese Communist Party front group, the Chinese Progressive Association out of San Francisco, which has a umbrella group called the Left Roots, under which is the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, Liberation Road Society. These 3 ladies were longtime members of the Chinese Progressive Association in San Francisco. They are the founders of BLM, the organization. Here's a problem, because that's like a big thing now in BLM, and they control the narrative, and you can't, you don't want to speak, just like the anti-Semitism thing. Like Gina, what is her name? Gina Carano. She says, basically, the Nazis turned neighbor against neighbor before they ever actually started killing the Jews, right? Which is a historical fact. And you go, oh, it's anti-Semitic. No, it's a statement of fact. That made no characterization about Jews or anything of the sort, except that first they turned people against them, then they killed them. How is that anti-Semitic? But they used that to back you off, and she's immediately fired. Dana White aggravated him. Who watches UFC? Dana White says, leave her alone. Everybody makes mistakes. Really, Dana? What mistake did she make? What are you talking about? Right? Shut up. Don't say anything. Give me a break. Idiotic. That's what happens when you start apologizing to these stinking terrorists. But here's the thing. So people don't have a concept. You watch the protests, and protests everywhere, and you see Black Lives Matter protests. Here's the thing. You have a lot of well-intentioned people out there who were sincerely upset about stuff they're seeing and they're protesting, right? That's the Black Lives Matter sentiment, which everybody in this room, I hope, agrees with, right? We all believe Black Lives Matter. Amen? The problem is people don't understand the distinction between Black Lives Matter, the sentiment or the movement, and Black Lives Matter, the organization. Black Lives Matter, the organization led and founded by these 3 ladies, is a subversive socialist organization hell-bent on overthrowing America. They meet with communist socialist dictators all over the world. This is a guy down in our neck of the woods in Florida, runs the Dream Defenders. He is the son of one of the co-chairs of the PLO under Yasser Arafat, terrorist group, if anybody doesn't remember that. Here's this, one of the ways that, so the Chinese Progressive Association, then they have all these little groups that they fund. Here's one, story-based strategy. There's all techniques and training of how to craft and control the narrative. I mean, they literally write out the stories, write out the scripts. You ever think it's strange when something happens and then members of a certain party, it seems like within 30 seconds they're all saying the exact same thing? You ever think that was odd? This is why. It's already prepared. There are paid groups funded to create the narrative and the response. They also, they recruit and fund students. They bring into this and train them to be good socialists. Here's a group, the Asian American Advocacy Fund, that was under the Chinese Progressive Association out of San Francisco. Asian American Advocacy Fund, defending the rights of Hawaiian Asian Americans in Georgia. No, seriously. So this was the group that was on the ground recently in Georgia. Coincidence? Hashtag just saying. One of their groups, Asians for Black Lives. Right? We got to build that solidarity. You're not white. All the evil people that don't look like you, we're one of you. I mean, come on, guys. And you see their resources is basically, how to sow division and subversive ideas. Ties all the way in former Nazi Germany that are surrogates for the Chinese Communist Party in Europe. So, I mean, ties all over the place. So it's important that we're informed about this stuff. Are you with me? Can you agree with me on that? I mean, have you heard some things that, let's say we all had a good grasp on this. Just say the revolutionary anarchist thing, just as one example. Maybe we all had a grasp on this 1 year ago. You think maybe some recent events could have been different? Hello? You could have been informed, and you're not bamboozled by a bunch of manipulators. And I'm not trying to blast people that got sucked into it. You don't know what you don't know. I'm telling you, they've been at this for centuries. For centuries. Some of this is classic destabilization techniques that even the CIA uses worldwide. And I would suggest to you some of the same people involved in it, but we'll leave that there. So, just a couple of things. The federal government has said this stuff is okay, this critical race theory is okay. The states can still step in and say, no, that's not happening here. We need states that will to step up and ban this racist garbage. I call it Nazism in blackface. I mean, it basically goes right to the doorstep of promoting racial genocide. That white fragility is one of the most disgusting things I've read in my entire life. It is sick, absolutely sick. Sickening and demeaning and disempowering to the very people they say they're defending, which is bizarre. I think it's disgusting. These folks disgust me. For not the least of which, because of my own family. Because I look at, my dad's side of the family and think, you're targeting my family. You're using and manipulating my family. By claiming you support them, you love them, you're helping them. And you're actually dehumanizing them, basically saying they can't make it on their own, they need help. You're so pathetic, right? This is the message that they send. You're so pathetic as a black American that you can't do anything on your own. Are you freaking kidding me? Oh, well, there was slavery 400 years ago, so, you can't do anything. I need to come back and give my More Than Victims presentation, the history of the black founding fathers and mothers in America. That'll flip that. But my great-great-grandfather walked off the plantation, went and fought in the war, left left Kentucky, traveled to Bakersfield, California, took the knowledge that they gained on the plantation, went to Bakersfield, California, planted cotton fields, became very successful farmers using what he gained off the plantation. You're going to look at my grandfather, and some of our family still receiving royalties. There's some white folks now farming those cotton fields on behalf of our family. Just saying. And some of our family still receives royalties off of that property. You're going to look at my family, my great-great-grandfather, who lived in slavery, who came out of slavery, and look what he accomplished. And you're going to stand there and tell me that somehow you're held back because 400 years ago. Shut up. If you got a social justice church, get out. That's not the Bible. It's not the gospel. The social justice, basically remember, the devil's a counterfeiter. So they take the idea of charity that God speaks to the church. He's telling the church to take care of the poor, and the biblical poor. I used to say biblical poor, right? Because it's not poor that they say is poor. The Bible defines poor. There's a biblical poor. It's the people that do not have the ability at their present moment, at their present situation, to help themselves. And then you help those people to help themselves by the power of God. And we're called to do that. Take care of the orphans and the widows and the biblically poor. That's the church. The social justice divides, and they're not like you, and you should hate this group, and this group, and you need the government to take care of you. That's not the scripture. That's an abomination and adulteration of the gospel of God. That's an abomination of faith, a distortion of faith, where you're proclaiming to the world that God is not capable of taking care of his people. Folks, my Father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He is the king that sits upon the throne of the universe. And he doesn't need a government bailout, and neither do I. So we need to build that patriot economy, continue to educate and expose like we're doing, secure our local governments, secure state governments, organize locally like what we're talking about, strengthen your church. Amen. Get born again, get full of the Holy Ghost, get on fire for God. I'm going to tell you one thing that I don't have time to get into. I'm just going to finish up here just in like 2 minutes and 37 seconds, okay? There's an addendum to this where we've now in 2016, you had the Korean Go champion go and compete. Anybody know this? Go and compete with Google's AI. Who remembers that story? And the whole of the Asian world is watching this, tens of millions of people watching this. And think about this. In 2016, the thought at that time, just to give you an idea of the quantum speed with which this present world has come into existence, the thought at that time, it was laughable to think that a computer was going to beat a human at Go. Think about that. Now, you hear that and you think that's crazy talk. Because today, it would be laughable to think that the person would beat AI at a game, right? That would be the consensus today. That's how fast this present world has come into being. 2016, that happened. China was watching, beat their guy, this hero of the entire Asian world, and he got beat 4 times out of 5. And China said, whoop. We got to get on the ball. We will be the dominant power of artificial intelligence on this planet, and they went after it. And you go to China right now, AI controls essentially the entire country. You've got this social credit system and all that. And so now you got these globalist countries, these globalists that I said were at the top, and now they have the tool of AI. And that's when Google, right? Matrix came out in 99, Google went public in 2000. Just saying. And that's what the Facebook, all social media, Google, you don't search Google. Google searches you. No, seriously. Social media is set up as a collector of human behavioral data. You're a nursemaid for AI. That's fed to the AI. It grows, it learns, and so they can control you. Now they've got that. And I was teaching this to the class, and they were like, oh my gosh. And I said, that's right. You better get that. You cannot defeat this only in the natural. You have no natural means to roll that back. You need the power of God. Am I saying not do these natural things? No, do these natural things. But doing these natural things outside of the divine empowerment of God himself, you don't have a chance. But can I say, if God be for you, who can be against you? And I want to give you a word right here, and I'm done. Don't get depressed. This is not a message of depression. This is not a message of defeat. This is a message of victory. Because why is all this happening? Things are not falling apart. Things are falling into place. Because this is God orchestrating events to overthrow his adversaries and deliver his people. And guess what? You are a primary part of that orchestration. So what I just recommend to you is to get fully in, all in on what God is doing, so that when we stand in that last day, when that big CEO of the universe comes in and put his foot down and claims his property on this earth, I want to be standing on his side and say, I've been in this fight from the very beginning, and I'm still with him. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. How many of you are on that side of the fight? All right. 3 of you. Wonderful. That was fantastic. So happy for you 3. The rest of you will get to work on. We have service Sunday morning for you. Hey, we're going to take a little bit of a 15-minute break here, and then we're going to come back together for Chris Ann Hall's final presentation. And are you blessed? Are you happy? Are you learning something? Are you glad? Well, as they say, let us all rise. Go use the restroom. You can use the restroom, get something to drink, and come back in 15 minutes.